For many years, one of the biggest criticisms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe was its lack of compelling villains. We've been salivating for years waiting for the mighty Thanos to give the Avengers a biblical level ass whooping, and he delivered. But while it's cool they've slowly been building up Thanos as the big bad of the MCU, teasing us with post-credit glimpses and revealing that he was the mastermind behind the attack on New York, maybe we've actually had the big bad in front of our noses this entire time. The man who was there from the very beginning, Iron Man, aka Tony Stark. That's right, I'm seriously arguing that Tony Stark is worse than Thanos because it all comes down to motivations.
Yeah, apparently I'm volatile, self-obsessed, don't play well with others.
Thanos might be killing off half the population, but he's doing it for a noble purpose, to save the universe from self-destruction. On the other hand, Iron Man might be one of the good guys, but he's arrogant and selfish and motivated mostly by self-preservation, so that every decision he makes leaves a path of destruction behind him. By succumbing to his hubris, Tony becomes the architect of his own destruction and ultimately the destruction of the Avengers themselves. Let's break it down by movie. Phase 1 of the MCU gives us a great 3-story arc for Iron Man. In his first movie, we're introduced to Tony Stark, the ultimate self-absorbed playboy douchebag who made his fortune manufacturing weapons. You know the story. He ends up captured, injured by one of his own missiles, so he creates an Iron Man suit and breaks free. Then he upgrades his Iron Man suit and goes on a mission to destroy all the terrorist cells that have illegally acquired his weapons. Foregoing the typical secret identity superhero trope, Tony boldly proclaims,
I am Iron Man.
signaling that while he may have changed, the old Tony Stark arrogance isn't going away. In fact, he's so arrogant that he chooses taking the credit rather than the safety of those around him. Iron Man 2 continues to dig deeper into Tony's psyche.
Have you been drinking?
Stark refuses to allow the government access to his Iron Man tech and needlessly humiliates fellow weapons manufacturer Justin Hammer, which forces Hammer to partner with Birdlove and Whiplash to create their own murder bots. All the while, Tony's arrogance and recklessness pushes his best friend James Rhodes to not only don an iron suit to fight him, but to take that suit to the military and, by association, Justin Hammer, which enables Whiplash to eventually use it to target innocent civilians at the Stark Expo.
I never know if you're gonna kill yourself or wreck the whole company.
I think I did okay.
In the Avengers, we finally see Tony come full circle. He's called out numerous times by Captain America for being selfish and the antithesis of a team player.
Big man in a suit of armor. Take that off, what are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Tony's finally able to redeem himself by making the sacrifice play of taking a nuclear weapon that was aimed at New York City into outer space, willing to sacrifice his life if need be for the lives of millions of others. Now, while Tony's life was ultimately spared, it was a great conclusion to a 3-story arc of a selfish man-child who becomes a true selfless hero. But this is the comic book world. There are no real conclusions, and because of the serialized nature of these movies, Tony's character was forced to regress and undo much of this growth in the following sequels. And that's where Tony as the villain really starts to take form. Iron Man 3 is where the wheels start to fall off a bit for Tony.
You've experienced a severe anxiety attack.
Haunted by the events in the Avengers, Tony's obsessive need to control everything rears its ugly head again, this time in the form of picking a fight with the Mandarin. Tony professes that his main goal is protecting Pepper, which he fails spectacularly at by arrogantly giving a known terrorist his home address.
10880 Malibu Point.
Gee, I wonder what's gonna happen. Fear and paranoia end up being Tony's biggest driving motivation against a villain that ultimately he created years prior by having no compassion for the guy.
I had just created demons, and I didn't even know it.
In the end, Tony destroys all of his armor and plans to retire, but as we learn, his obsession with single-handedly saving the world.
Anybody remember when I carried a nuke through a wormhole?
No, it's never come up.
Saved New York?
Never heard that.
Recall that?
And his distrust for anyone else to do the job forces him to abandon his plans of retirement and keep on avenging. Age of Ultron is where Tony's descent into villainy truly begins. This movie is a highlight reel of a constant thread of Tony being a terrible team player. He keeps stuff from his fellow Avengers, he doesn't listen.
Tell me you're going to shut him down.
You're not the director of me.
He doesn't trust anyone but himself, and he sows the seeds of discontent within the team. In his obsession to protect the world from an alien threat, Stark, behind the team's back, creates Ultron as a worldwide AI defense system.
If we can harness this power, apply it to my Iron Legion protocol.
His science experiment goes incredibly wrong.
I believe your intentions to be hostile.
And Ultron winds up going rogue and becoming a snarky, genocidal murder bot.
You killed someone?
Wouldn't have been my first call.
But instead of learning his lesson that maybe his way isn't always the best,
This is very terrible. Is it so? It is.
Stark doubles down on his decision to create an AI again behind his team's back. This time creating Vision to combat Ultron. He pretty much forces Bruce Banner to do it.
I'm caught in a time loop. This is exactly where it all went wrong.
I know. We're mad scientists. We're monsters, buddy. We've got to own it.
He's like the devil. Come on, Bruce, this is what we do. Come on. Ultimately, Stark pretty much gets lucky that he didn't have 2 Ultron-level asshole bots running the world at this point. Once again, Stark retires at the end of this movie.
It's time for me to tap out.
But his obsession to control everything keeps it from actually sticking. Now we've come to Civil War, and the sins of the past movies come back to haunt Tony.
In the 8 years since Mr. Stark announced himself as Iron Man, the number of potentially world-ending events has risen at a commensurate rate.
His obsession with being Iron Man and single-handedly protecting the world forces Pepper to break things off with him. Perhaps egging on a terrorist to blow up your house while she's still in it didn't help very much.
Hey, I admit it. My fault. Sorry.
Anyway, the United Nations drafts up the Sokovia Accords to regulate the Avengers based on a string of catastrophic events, including the destruction of Sokovia caused by Stark's robot creation.
Ultron. My fault.
Seeking absolution, Tony essentially makes a deal with the devil, General Ross, to absolve himself of his guilt.
We need to be put in check. Whatever form that takes, I'm game.
He tries to get the team to sign off on this, giving him reassurance that what he's doing is right, and gets frustrated that Cap won't agree.
I'm doing what has to be done. You keep telling yourself that.
His need for atonement eventually drives a wedge within the team and splits it apart. His need to be right and his inability to compromise disbands Earth's mightiest heroes before the threat that he is so worried about actually comes. He is literally fulfilling his own prophecy of being unprepared for the end. Before we get to the grand finale, we have to make a quick detour to Spider-Man Homecoming. Tony created a company to clean up the mess after the Battle of New York, putting Adrian Toomes out of work. This ultimately leads to the creation of Vulture.
So not assholes who made this mess are getting paid to clean it up.
The Vulture and his selling of weapons ultimately causes Spider-Man a ton of unnecessary grief. If Toomes had been given a legit job, he wouldn't have had to start an illegal arms trade, and the weapons would have never made it to the streets. It also breaks up his entire family when Adrian has to go to jail at the end. Not to mention, Stark has the balls to lecture Spider-Man about not listening and knowing his place when he's the MCU's harbinger of doom. I'm not even gonna get to how messed up it is that Tony is giving a 15-year-old military-grade weapons.
Activating instant kill.
No.
It's not even your movie and you're making people's lives worse, Tony. And that brings us to Infinity War. Tony takes an immediate dislike to Doctor Strange because he doesn't like that Strange doesn't agree with his idea to destroy the Time Stone.
Why don't we just stick this one down the garbage disposal?
No can do.
Even though Strange has infinitely more knowledge than him. Stark also pushes for them to go to Titan, the homeworld of Thanos, instead of regrouping back on Earth. Now, let me clarify. I can only speculate since we don't know the ending of this entire story yet, but perhaps the situation wouldn't have been quite as dire had Tony actually listened to Strange and gone back to Earth. When Strange is phasing through the different futures, he specifically says, "I looked into possible outcomes of the coming conflict," meaning he was looking at the future from this point in which they had already decided to go to Titan. That implies to me that perhaps the odds could have been way better had Stark not insisted that they went to Titan and instead went back to Earth to re-team with the Avengers as Doctor Strange had suggested. Thanos would now conceivably be out of 2 of the stones, Doctor Strange's Time Stone and the Mind Stone, assuming that a full Avengers team could actually protect Vision. But because of Stark, they end up on Titan. Strange has to give Thanos the Time Stone, and Thanos ends up wiping out half of the universe, including Stark's protege Spider-Man, who dies in his arms. Stark's worst fears come to life because of a string of decisions he himself made. It all boils down to this: telling his team about Ultron, the single most destructive action in the Tony Stark narrative that perfectly encapsulates his character's flaws, and the Avengers saying, no, that is a terrible idea, and him actually listening to them means no Sokovia tragedy. No Sokovia tragedy likely means no Sokovia Accords. No Accords and no tragedy means nothing to atone for, which means no reason to split up the Avengers and no reason to get a teenage kid involved. No Ultron also means no Vision, which means the Mind Stone isn't out just in plain sight. It would still be in Avengers custody, which means it would be harder for Thanos to defeat a full, united Avengers team when he's down 2 stones. Boom! So what exactly can we draw from all of this? Well, we can almost universally agree that the best villains are the ones that believe that what they are doing is right and they hold strong in their ideology, believing that the ends justify the means. Tony believes in securing the world, or more specifically, his world. That includes his Avenger pals and his love Pepper, and will stop at almost nothing to ensure their protection, even if that means causing some collateral damage in the process. Thanos believes in saving the entire universe from collapsing under the weight of itself, even if that means he has to sacrifice half of the universe to do it. While Tony's ideals are selfish and come from a place of personal insecurity and an obsessive need to control the situation,
We need you. Yeah, more than you know.
Thanos' motives are completely selfless. He is willing to sacrifice the one thing he loves most, his daughter Gamora, to ensure the betterment, in his view, of the universe. Tony is a futurist just like Thanos. He's constantly looking forward at the cost of the right now. He's also an absolutist, but switches what he's absolute about on a whim. He realizes his weapons are bad and takes an absolute stance against weapon development. He then absolutely refuses to cooperate with the government.
We got the Iron Man weapon turned over to the people of the United States of America.
Well, you can forget it.
Until a lady makes him feel guilty, so he absolutely swings the other way and supports the Sokovia Accords. His ideologies are like fashion glasses. He wears what makes him feel good at the time. It circles all the way back to his arrogance and his need for control. He's ultimately more concerned with his own gratification than the needs of anyone else around him. Thanos wishes to save the universe by trying to destroy it, and Stark keeps destroying things by trying to save them, by not listening to anyone and only doing what he thinks is right.
I'm bringing the party to you.
Some may call him a tragic hero, but to me, I think he's the most compelling villain in the MCU.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
But hey, he's really funny, so all's forgiven.